Hello, and thank you for joining us this month for Tiger Talk. I'm Jeremy, the Superintendent of Schools, and this month I'm joined with Matt Coleman, our Board President, and with Sarah Brink, our Board Treasurer. So we're going to talk a bit about how the school year went and kind of some next steps and things to think about for next year. It's been another really successful school year. Excited about wrapping it up. It's hard for me to believe how quickly this school year has gone and that we're already at this point in the year. Next week we have 221 seniors that we'll see graduating from the high school as they're ready to spread their wings and go on and face that next chapter in their lives. I do have a couple big shout outs I want to give this month. It's kind of an exciting time. So many recognitions to think about this time of month, but a couple of highlights I want to make. First is to Mike Koffenberg. Mike is a 24-25 MEA Friend of Education. MEA shares Mike is a warm and welcoming presence in the cafeteria at Parkside Elementary. Greets students by name and makes them feel seen and valued each day. His attentiveness to details like new glasses or haircuts shows how much he cares about each student. With his kindness and patience, Mike truly makes a positive difference in the lives of both students and staff. I'd also like to recognize Mrs. Brenda Elton this month. Brenda is the MEA Teacher of the Year. Mrs. Brenda Elton has been a dedicated educator and active MEA member in Marshall Public Schools for 31 years. Serving in various teaching roles across multiple buildings. She is committed to student success, providing individualized instruction and support, especially in the alternative learning settings. Her perseverance, passion for teaching, and long-standing service to MEA make her a standout candidate for the MEA Teacher of the Year. So I want to say congratulations to both of these two and certainly thank them for their service. This year also happens to be Brenda Elton's retirement year, so certainly we're going to miss Brenda as she moves on to her next chapter of life as well. At all of our sites, like I mentioned earlier, so many exciting things going on. We were talking about on the way over here some of the fun things. This end of the year data is coming in, and we're looking at all these things that happened this year. I just want to call attention to a few things that are standing out to me. First thing, we really had a record-breaking year this year with our activities department. We had 14 athletic and academic teams that made state tournament appearances yet, and we're not done with spring, so we could have potential of some more yet. So really just an amazing year, that the number of teams that we've had appearing in the state tournaments and really being successful. At our CTE, we've talked all throughout the year about CTE courses and our CTI Center and all the things happening out there. We had 116 different students participate in CTE courses this year at the CTI Center. So those advanced level courses that are really preparing kids for future, for careers, that job-ready skills that we're teaching out there. It's great to see that, and we're seeing even higher enrollments for next year. Last week, we had the Pride in the Tiger Scholarship Ceremony. Pride in the Tiger is a great supporter of our schools. Last week, they gave over $242,000 out in scholarships to our seniors. I get goosebumps still thinking about that number and that amount of support and just what that shows from our community members supporting our students as they're going out and entering the workforce and additional education after high school. Little Cubs program, our littlest kids, we had 112 4-year-olds completing that program this year that are ready to go and start kindergarten next year. We talked a lot this year about READACT training and about reading and how that's changing with some changes the requirements the state has made. We had 111 teachers and staff, so administrators and teachers that participated in that training, the Phase 1 training this year. All of them have completed that training. The results, we're talking to Matt in the car, we're seeing great results of what's happening in our classrooms from this additional training and the curriculum and the work our teachers are putting in. Certainly supporting our youngest learners and seeing a lot of success with those students. In fact, I was just at Parkside earlier this morning. We have 82% of our kindergarten students who are reading at benchmark with our spring assessment this year. At the start of the year, only 26% of those kids were at benchmark. So huge growth amount and that's just our kindergarten. Every grade we're seeing something like that, but that work that's taking place is really valuable, and it's finding, our kids are finding success and seeing that benchmark level reached in reading, and that's going to continue as we continue to do this work across all the grade levels. There's so many things to recognize outside of athletic trophies, scholarships, and fine arts performances, other than test data as well. I just want to share a quote in her board report this month. Darcy Love shared something that it kind of hit me, and I thought this was really important to think about too. She shared, the student who started the year very shy and timid has become confident and outgoing. The student who cried every day because they missed their family has now blossomed to become independent. The list of examples could go on and on. It's just important to remember all gains can't be measured through a test. We celebrate many successes and learn from assessment results as we continue to serve and support students as they become scholars. That thought that so many of our kids, the assessment result is important, that's exciting, but there's so many other skills being learned in school as well. And just great success stories. Every teacher you talk to in the district has poured their heart and soul into these kids and working with them, and all those little things that happen throughout the year too are important to think about as well. As we celebrate all these things that are great and taking place in our school, it's also important to think about the financial challenges that we continue to face. In order for us to continue making the gains and the progress that we're seeing with all these things, we need to have stable funding in our schools. We've talked throughout the year about that need. The rising costs and everything, increasing, it's going up in everything that we spend money on, but we also have increases in unfunded state mandates. They're creating budget problems across the district. As we were preparing for next year's budget, our board was forced to make $350,000 worth of cuts into our expenses for next year, and in addition, plan on about $800,000 of spending out of our budget reserves for next year. Looking ahead, we're not seeing any real additional funding in sight. The legislature hasn't finished their work yet this year, but we're looking at likely 0% increase for the first biennium and a decrease in funding for the second biennium. So there's no end in sight to that need that we're facing. That financial stability is really crucial to our success as a school district. We have to invest in our programs in order to see things growing from one year to the next. Our students are benefiting from the things that are taking place in the schools. Over the last 10 years, inflation has increased by 65%. But the general ed funding has only increased by 47%. The difference between inflation and the formula allowance is over $1,300 per student that we're behind in the funding to meet the needs of all of our kids and do all these things that we need to have happen in our classrooms. The cost of running schools, thinking about salaries, utilities, transportation, and equipment, they all continue to rise as the funding continues to lag behind. In order to bridge that gap between funding levels and rising costs, a district is facing some difficult decisions in the future years. We just know we can't cut our way to excellence. To put it into context, we're not alone in Marshall. There's districts across the state are facing this. In Rochester Public Schools, the home of the Mayo Clinic, they nearly closed 3 schools in their district until they passed an operating referendum that saved them from that this last November. Over 97% of schools in the state have an operating referendum, and Marshall hasn't had one since 2018. We're one of the very few schools that don't. Our community members, you expect schools to continue, and rightly expect schools to continue improving and meeting every child's needs. We talk about that all the time, how we want to meet individual student needs and all the supports and resources needed to make that happen. But with the financial challenges, it makes it harder to maintain, let alone improve the quality of education. Students are coming with greater needs than we've ever seen in the past, means greater level of services needed to meet those things. So one of the things that we're talking about is an operating referendum. We brought to community a couple of years ago. In 2022, we talked about operating referendum. We're looking at that again for this fall, and we need to share some information with the community about that. You'll hear more from us coming throughout the summer and into next fall, but we wanted to share some information with the community at this point too. Any referendum that we propose is going to be based off what the community expects from our schools. We need to work together to secure resources that allow us to move forward and not backward. We know that the Marshall Public Schools, we're a cornerstone in the community. We support the local economy, we connect families and educate the next generation of workers and leaders. And yet we're one of the few school districts that does not have this funding source in place. So we're here today. That's my lead in to why we invited you guys to join me today. I don't think I've had a board member come and join me for Tiger Talk before. We want to talk about that need, about what's going on in the district, what we see as some future needs, and how we plan to address that. So Matt, you've been on the school board for how many years?
16, I think.
16 years,
Yep.
So been around for a while. Sarah, you're relatively new to the board.
I'm in my third year.
Yeah,
Yep.
third year. So Matt's seen a lot of things kind of come and go on the board,
Yep.
and Sarah, this is probably the first time kind of going through some of these things. So
Yes.
yeah, so some conversations about certainly how do we move forward? How do we best meet the needs of all of our students in the district? So just as a board member, let's start with, I started sharing some successes that I was thinking about, and I'm going to ask you guys some of the same questions. So thinking about our Marshall Public Schools, what events or achievements, as we're looking at the end of the school year, do you think really defined this school year? I'll let either one of you go first.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, this is the first full school year that we had the CTI Center in operation. And our part of our motto is to educate all learners. So that's a great resource for for our students. And then I think of the level of community support that went towards that building and that program is just it's phenomenal. So I think that's a huge success for us.
Yeah.
And I think the science of reading and the BAR models that we've been initiated this year, which we will talk about in a few seconds, has been a great help to all of our students.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Matt, something you're passionate about, you mentioned the other day too, thinking about activities, programs, and things that happen there. There's so many things in the classroom and outside the classroom that we talk about a lot, the board table and just in the community when we're talking about our districts. So.
And you had mentioned our activities doing so well. On the state level, we also had some students and BPA go to nationals. So
yeah, absolutely.
So it's a big deal.
In fact, we have an 8th grader participating in the National Spelling Bee next week, so he will miss the last week of school because he is participating in Washington, D.C. at a spelling bee.
That's great.
So
that's a big deal.
it is a big deal. It's just awesome. So you mentioned a little bit the science of reading and BAR. Those are two things that we've talked about on Tiger Talk. We've talked about the board meeting, but why don't you guys talk a little bit more about what that is? Because those are things that maybe our viewers aren't really sure about.
So the BAR, I'll talk about the BAR program. In my mind, I think the simplest way that I kind of describe it to myself is it's a way for each student to be looked at to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks. So, originally the program started with the freshman class coming in and then expanded into the sophomore class. But, I think back, with my kids being in the high school, how it applied to them was, going from middle school to high school that's a transition in that, it's quite a bit different. The expectations are different, the homework, the schedules, it's just such a different setting than the middle school. So the BAR program really helped to make sure that the students, and I think of mine in particular, that they started out, on the right foot. And so they were set up for success from the very beginning. And that was huge. And so since then, I think it's been so successful that the BAR program has expanded into the middle school and the Southview School. So it's a great program.
Yeah, absolutely. With that same focus, the building assets, reducing risks. So looking at the strengths of every student and how can we build off that and build relationships with kids that we know are so important to be able to improve everything else. So absolutely, we did have some great success there.
And I think it's unique that it looks at all students. So it's not just the ones that are maybe struggling. It's also addressing the ones who are excelling. So they also get that look at too. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it comes to that when we talk about that identifying and recognizing the individual needs of every one of our students. And that's so important that every kid has that adult that can do that with them. So that's great. Matt, do you want to tackle science of reading?
I will try to tackle science of reading. So the science of reading we started maybe 3 or 4 years ago before the READ Act even came about. So Marshall was way ahead of the curve on the science of reading. And I think the science of reading really goes back to teaching kids how to read the way I learned in the 60s and 70s. The phonics and stuff like that. I don't know all the technical terms, but I feel like it's really helping, and with all of our teachers being trained, I know the training process is very intense. My daughter went through it, and I know it is very intense and a lot of work, but I just want to applaud the teachers for what they have done with the science of reading, and we've already seen results, so it's going to be a great thing, I think. So
yep, absolutely. It was a big ask when that came on. I know teachers were apprehensive a little bit at first because it was huge, but as we're working through that, we're seeing great success and just understanding how kids learn to read and be able to apply those principles in our classrooms is really important. So we're just wrapping up this school year, but of course we're all thinking about next year already. That's kind of where our minds are by this time of year. So what are each of you most looking forward to for next year and in the future for Marshall Public Schools?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. I think we're going to continue to add and improve our programs at the CT Center. And I think out here in rural Minnesota, that's really important, and there's a lot of people standing behind it. A lot of businesses are excited about it, so I think as we improve our programming out of the CT Center, it's going to help the entire area.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I'm excited to see as we get a little bit more time behind us on the READ Act to see those numbers flow through. And I know it's tough to gauge just on test scores, but it's a start. So I'm excited to see what those look like after we get more runtime.
Absolutely. You think about the science of reading being so important, especially for our youngest learners, but for all kids who are struggling reading. But that understanding that, and then the CTE thing, if you don't get one piece, we can't do the next piece. And the whole focus with CTE has been getting those advanced level courses in for our high school kids, but starting it even earlier with middle school and building up to that and having those advanced job skills. Because Sarah, I think you mentioned earlier our mission statement, preparing all learners for success. And not all learners are going to a 4-year school, and sometimes there's other options, and thinking about how do we meet those needs of everyone. That's maybe been a demographic that we hadn't had as many options for in the past, and it is so great to see those things taking place too.
Yep.
So
It's exciting to see the focus broaden behind just these 4-year degrees, which they're great, but I think there's some great careers out there as well in some of the trade schools.
Right, absolutely. And even I think about some of our students, just making them aware, and our business partners, I think Matt, you mentioned earlier the support behind the CTE work, the business partners in town coming in and spending time with the programming and talking to our kids and making those connections, and for our kids to hear about all the opportunities that exist right here in Marshall, where even if they leave to go to school, they can come back and have a great career, and they don't have to go metro area. I think for so many years we heard from how many kids, I have to go to the metro area or I won't get a good job, there's nothing for me, and there's so many things that are available and accessible to our students right here in town. So that's been great work. That's some of the things I'm most excited about as well with our district right now. For both of you, another question for both of you, what are your priorities as we look ahead to next year? So we talked about a lot of different things, but if you had to list your biggest priorities, what would those be for you two as a board member?
I think right now our budget is our biggest priority. We lost all of our money we got from the pandemic. That went away. And we don't have like you said earlier, we don't have an operating referendum like a lot of schools do. So in order for our budget to be balanced and not cut anymore, the referendum is very important coming up here in November. So that is a priority.
Yeah, I would agree. And part of the discussion has to be, that we're transparent on what the budget looks like. So the budget, that is going to be a huge thing for us coming up here. We did some cuts already, but unfortunately, if we don't get a operating referendum, it's going to be some really deep cuts that will directly impact students.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hard to do. It's hard to look at all these great things taking place and think which of those things is the least important, or which are we able to kind of do what we need to do with the funds we have available. And that is a very hard conversation. So certainly appreciate your dedication to that as we work through that within our district. School funding is a concern, certainly not just for Marshall, though. It's kind of across the whole state. You guys want to talk about that a little bit? I know you attend a lot of different workshops and talk to other board members across the state. And what else are you hearing?
Well, I think it's just the fact that school funding statewide has not kept up with inflation for 20 years. So we're so far behind. What did you say? $1,300 per student.
If it would have kept
just because
up
of rising costs. Just because rising cost of everything our main cost is wages, and wages have gone up a lot, as everybody knows. So that's the main reason for our pressure on the budget. So.
Right.
Yep.
I think you hit it on earlier too, Matt, when you talked about the COVID funds. I mean, in 2022, we were out in the community asking for an operating referendum because we saw this kind of coming, and there were COVID funds kind of still in there, and they kind of masked some of this problem for a while. They helped us maintain programming for a while, and now that those funds are expended and certainly aren't going to be relied on going forward, that need still exists to be able to maintain programming for our students. So the high costs, unfunded mandates, all those things, that's a challenge.
In our budget, we are at the mercy of federal, state, local, revenues. That's what we're at the mercy of.
Right.
So.
And we're hearing these conversations, and not just education in the state or in the country even, but it's kind of all over. It's what are we going to do?
Yeah.
For the viewers, you guys want to explain a little bit the district's current position in terms of balancing the budget and what they maybe could expect coming up in future months. We touched on it a little bit, but
Well, as Jeremy said, this school year, for next year's budget, we're cutting $350,000 and plan to use $800,000 of our reserve to balance the budget. And probably going forward, there's even going to be a bigger shortfall if we don't get any more local revenue. So, and we're planning to ask for an operating referendum in November. We haven't really set a number on what that's going to look like yet, but there'll be a lot of information coming out maybe before school's done and for sure this summer. So,
Yep.
yep, absolutely. So projected deficit, what realistically does that mean for our schools and students?
We're looking at, further cuts. So that means, looking at class sizes, unfortunately, programs that directly impact our students. They're going to be tough decisions if we don't have, additional funding sources coming in. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Because we can't continue to spend, in the deficit. We can't continue to pull from the reserves. That's not a realistic plan. So it's just, unfortunately, it's going to be some really hard decisions.
Right. So you think about reserves only exist for so long, and then as you expend them, you don't replenish them. So.
Correct. Yep.
and we always try to minimize any reductions in the classroom, but it's impossible. When you're making cuts anywhere, it's going to affect kids somewhere. So.
Right. Right. Talk about some options going forward.
Well, hopefully the referendum will be supported. That's the goal, right? But if not, then we're going to have to take a real deep dive in line by line what we're going to do with the budget.
Right.
And as everybody has seen, the state budget isn't in any better shape. So we're not going to get any more money from the state in the near future. So it's going to be up to the community of Marshall to support our schools. So.
Right. I know in the last budget cycle, the state had set this increase, an inflationary rate tied, that's kind of an automatic piece for the schools, and some conversation about that maybe won't exist going forward and some of those things. So maybe changes even in how the state funds schools. Compensatory ed continues to be a conversation, how they fund special ed, how they fund transportation. There was some talk about non-public schools and how they fund some of those, and still we're still at a spot where there's a lot of questions there too, so it's hard for us to know exactly where we're at, and that's some of the holding pattern. Maybe we know that there's struggle, and just some of those things we're waiting to see where that all settles out to have some final answers. So anything additional either of you would like to share with the viewers today?
I'd just like to stress when the information on the referendum starts coming out that you get informed. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. Just make sure you're informed before you go vote. So that's all I ask. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would second that. Be informed, ask the questions. That's really the only way to go into it. Is just eyes wide open is what we're asking.
Right.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you two joining me this month for Tiger Talk. Appreciate you all listening and paying some attention, focusing on the schools. We do have great schools. We have great teachers. We have a lot of great things taking place. Just need to continue to plan for how we go forward and keep those things happening within the constraints of what we have available to us. So thank you for watching. This is probably the last Tiger Talk until next fall. So see you next fall.